Welcome to Big and Scary Story Talk. I'm Heather Nani, and today we're talking about Daphne du Maurier's The Doll. Du Maurier, a famous British novelist born in 1907, passed away in 1989. She's best known for Rebecca, the Gothic novel where she introduced the world to Manderley, the British estate that's set high on a cliff top overlooking the rocky coast. Hitchcock had later used it as inspiration for his movie Rebecca. This story, The Doll, was part of a smaller collection that was last published in 1937 and has not been published since. However, you can get it online. The Guardian posted it online. So if you haven't read it, I would suggest turning this off, going and reading it, and then coming back because it's a really interesting story. And if you have small children within earshot, I would also suggest that you move into the other room because this episode is full of adult content due to the nature of the story. That said, let's begin. There's a lot to unwrap, so let's start with a recap. Story begins with a Dr. Strongman who found a waterlogged journal. He starts as the initial narrator and explains to the reader that he's going to read you what's in the journal because people had wanted to know what he found. Then the narrative perspective shifts and suddenly it's the voice of a madman telling you that he has gone mad. It is the person that wrote the journals, and he begins to tell the story of Rebecca, a beautiful, enchanting violinist that he met at one of his friend's lofts. She's waif-like and pale with giant eyes and crazy dark hair, and he's absolutely enchanted by her, but he can't read her because she's hot and she's cold. One day she invites him to her flat in Bloomsbury. He says it's very cold and stark. He doesn't understand how Rebecca can stand it in there. She shows him a big room where she rehearses, a kitchen area, a bedroom, but there's another room that she doesn't show him. Anyway, he leaves, he comes back another day, and she says to him, did you ever love someone so much that you want to hurt them with jealousy? And the narrator explains what it means to be sadistic to her. And she goes, oh, okay, I want to show you something. So she takes him by the hand and leads him into the room that she didn't show him before. And she opens the door, and it's this round room. And there's velvet drapes on the walls and big heavy curtains hanging in the windows. And it's really dark. There's just a fireplace that's it's starting to die out, and a chair and a table with a lamp, and sitting in the chair is a dude. And the narrator says, what's this? What's this? Who's he? And he looks, it's an evil looking thing, he says. Thinks it's a kid of like 16 years old. Rebecca says, I'd like to introduce you to Julio. Well, when the narrator gets a better look at Julio, he realizes it's not a dude, it's a doll. He's appalled, but then Rebecca approaches him and she starts kissing him. And anyway, they spend minutes or hours in the room, and eventually they go out to the front room and she says, I can't, this is too strong for me. He leaves. She tells him to come back another day. Anyway, he leaves, comes back. They have a little bit of a relationship. She's hot, she's cold. He doesn't understand. One night he can't stand it. It's midnight. So he says, I've got to go see Rebecca. He goes across town, is able to open the door of her apartment. It's not locked. She's not in the living room. She's not in the bedroom. She's not in the kitchen. He knows where she is. She's in the round room. So he opens the door, and there she has been with Julio. And that's the end of the story. This story is wild, especially when you think about the time in which it was written. Now, make no mistakes. This is not a great story. When you think about stories where someone is descending into madness that are done really well, you think Edgar Allan Poe and The Telltale Heart, or Charlotte Perkins Gilman with The Yellow Wallpaper. Du Maurier is young here, and the writing is a bit dramatic, melodramatic. The narrator likes to tell the reader how crazy he is. And then, like I said, there's a lot of melodrama as well. There's this scene where Rebecca's playing the violin and she actually gives the narrator an orgasm, practically, with her violin playing, and there's language like, oh, we were climbing higher and higher and flying. You know, kind of the hallmarks of what a younger writer would do. But it's so advanced in terms of content. This is a proper British girl writing about a sex doll. But when you look at du Maurier and her background, they were pretty bohemian. Her grandfather was George du Maurier, the novelist and cartoonist who wrote Trilby, which was probably the most popular novel in, I think it was around 1890. It's the story that introduced the world to being a young bohemian artist living in Paris. You know, 3 artists, a young maid named Trilby, very beautiful. They're all in love with her. Svengali comes along. He hypnotizes her. Anyway, it was all a rage. Caused a huge rage. And, you know, young people wanting to go to Paris and wear this special Trilby hats and smoke cigarettes and all of that. Anyway, now du Maurier's dad was Gerald du Maurier, who was an actor and manager. He had lots of actors and theater types in their house growing up. And one guest at the house once noted that, you know, George was talking about his sexual exploits with actresses while in front of Daphne and her 2 other sisters, while her poor mom, I believe it's Muriel Beaumont, who was also had been an actress, was upstairs. Now, Daphne herself was not super conservative in her life either. She was married, but she also had relationships with women. But what was interesting was when she was with women, she always said it wasn't her, it was her male alter ego named Eric Avon. But that said, people have said that her great love, Daphne du Maurier's greatest love, was her house Menabilly, I believe that's the name of it, which is what she based Manderley on. And Menabilly was a home that she was aware of before she wrote Rebecca, but eventually she was able to rent the house from the family that owns it. And her own daughter Flavia said that she caught her kissing the house once. Other people had described what du Maurier had as a kind of house-ophilia, but you kind of can see why du Maurier was so good at creating atmosphere and setting. I mean, obviously we saw it later in later years with Rebecca, but let's take the doll. Now the setting is pretty stark. There's not a lot of it. It's London, it's rainy, and Rebecca's flat, Rebecca from the doll, is kind of nondescript other than it's cold. But I think that was the genius of du Maurier, or the intelligence in crafting the story, because the coldness of the apartment made that one single round room with the velvet hangings so much more powerful and kind of scary, right? So what's great about this story is that you're seeing the makings of the beginnings of someone that would later craft, you know, again, Rebecca, my cousin Rachel, the Jamaica Inn. And it's a fascinating read. So I'm curious what you think. If you like this episode, please hit subscribe. And also in the comments, let me know what you think of the story. Like I said, I didn't personally think it was a spectacular story in and of itself, but it's a fascinating study. But maybe you just love the story standalone without even having read any of her other works. So I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.